No, here's the fucking news.
New York City are deploying the National Guard, effectively militarizing their streets and especially their subways. So is this about citizen safety, or is it, as Alex Jones warns, the piloting of martial law? You will be aware now that New York City, that most liberal of metropoles, has militarized its law forces by putting the National Guard on the subway. Now, New York City is no doubt in a time of crisis, evidently and apparently connected to the issue of migration. But is this sudden appearance of military personnel on the New York subways really about protecting the citizenry, or is it more insidious than that? Are we beginning to experience the piloting and grooming of a population to get us ready for militarized streets? For many years now, we've seen anti-protest laws, militarization of the police. Police cars that used to be like Nino, Sky-Electrics, Dukes of Hazzard, good old-fashioned fun, have become like tanks now. Why has that happened? When did that become necessary? Is it necessary in your neighborhood? And if rising crime is a problem in your neighborhood, what exactly is causing it? Do you trust the people that have the power behind the barrel of the gun or not? Let's have a look at Alex Jones's perspective. You'll be well aware that Alex Jones's perspective will be around centralized authoritarianism, global conspiracies and piloting. But having just lived through the last 5 years, it does seem that we have been subject, whether it was some of the events around the pandemic or recent censorship laws across the world, to the piloting of ideas in certain territories in order to normalize them. I'm talking about the freezing of bank balances, closing down of people's social media, using government proxies to censor dissenting voices, lockdowns, internment camps, arresting people for things they've said on the internet, imprisoning people for things they've said on the internet. While the time that we're talking about Donald Trump and how bad he is for democracy, is democracy, even under the auspices of actual Democrat rule, becoming more and more authoritarian? Let's start with Alex Jones, then we'll get into what we think is happening together.
Tonight, a new approach to keep subway riders safe.
Guns! Guns aiming at your face. The new way. The army threatening to kill you if you step out of line. Look how compliant the news always is. Look, don't say that this is terrifying. Don't start saying the military are on the subway now. That's a clear indication that whatever your political perspective, things have gone terribly wrong. Say instead, new way to keep you safe. New way to help you go to sleep at night. A firm punch right in the jaw.
Bag checks and beefed up security with members of the National Guard.
Beefed up like it's nutritious. It's like a bone broth made out of a gun pointed at you by the state. Night, night.
As CBS 2's Naveen Dhaliwal reports, the plan comes on the same day as another attack on a conductor.
So, attacks on conductors, gotta bring in the army, so.
With riders on edge, the governor is putting a plan in place that includes cameras in conductor cabs and more cops on the platforms. At Grand Central Terminal Wednesday evening, bag checks were underway.
It seems to me that in order to protect the legitimizing, raising authority, and indeed there's such a sort of raging debate in your country about guns and gun ownership and gun laws, and all it seems to amount to really is not whether or not there are guns, but who's allowed to have them. And we now know that the state doesn't want to discuss their guns. What about the dangers and threats of those guns? What about the many people that are killed in friendly fires, in wars? Perhaps all we're talking about in politics is who has the right to kill.
As tackling subway safety is now at the top of the list for city and state officials.
These brazen, heinous attacks on our subway system,
on our democracy, by me, on our subway by someone who's not me, have got to be met by, everyone's got guns now that works for me. You don't work for me? No guns. You work for me? Gun. Simple, really, huh?
will not be tolerated.
This was a stern message from the governor.
It is a stern message. It's a stern, very aggressive message. It's an authoritarian message. It's not stern, it's authoritarian. It will not be tolerated. I don't care about your past. I don't care about your social conditions. I don't care about your mental health. I don't care if there's been a fentanyl crisis. I don't care if America's breaking down. I don't care if you're delirious with doubt and you can't feel God in your heart anymore because you're surrounded by lies and treachery. All I care about is do as you're told or we'll kill you. What is the message?
After several attacks in the transit system in the past week, these attacks prompting the governor to deploy 1,000 members of the National Guard.
Look, that's the news doing the job of propaganda. These attacks prompting the governor. I don't know. I bet if you had the time to look at the data, you go, how many attacks are there each year since 1970 in New York on staff members? And then you'd have to look at a sort of a variety of factors. Poverty, inequality of wealth, mental illness, some government support. There's so many vital components. When the solution is always, we're going to take some more power because of this, there's a really nasty cough going around. So, in conclusion, we're going to take a lot more power. There's a really nasty Putin going around. So, in conclusion, we're going to take a lot more power. There's some really nasty truckers going on. So, in conclusion, we're going to take a lot more power. Is the answer always going to be, you're going to take a lot more power? There's a lot of people saying on the internet that we're taking too much power. So, we're going to be taking a lot more power and censoring those people. Okay, and the threat is Donald Trump how?
And police to subway systems across New York City.
What they're doing, checking bags to make sure explosive or illegal weapons aren't entering our subway system.
I think it's rather offensive to all of us as human beings that Eric Adams, being a person of colour, will be framed and celebrated here, or that the news reporter is a person of colour. I think both of those things are great. How fantastic. Let's have a diverse and representative, but above all else, fair and equal and truly representative society where you don't centralise authority. I'm getting rather tired of the idea that equality and fairness means highlighting programmes of representation in order to mask increasing authoritarianism. I agree with equality, in particularly when it comes to matters around gender and sex, but above all, wealth and power.
City officials say each week NYPD bag screening teams will be at 136 stations. That's about a third of the stations in the system. New York City Civil Liberties Union calling it heavy-handed.
But heavy-handed really means like, oh no, boss, there's another person was rude to a bus conductor. Like that heavy-handed means that you're not even actually in control of the weight of your power. And isn't that the perfect description of how globalist, elitist power, masquerading as American patriotic power, whether it's in foreign wars or on the most beautiful city in America, some would argue, New York City, and the imposition of authority, all in order, as usual, to help people.
Like stop and frisk, ripping a page straight out of a Giuliani playbook.
We had to, really, because the pages were stuck together. I'd like to take a note, every time a demon of the liberal elites have their ideas borrowed and utilised by those same liberal elites. Donald Trump is the worst thing that could ever happen. That's why that wall he's building, that we mocked him for, is still being built. That's why those cages that we condemned him for are still there and were in fact put there by Barack Obama. Giuliani, that pervert, lunatic, maniac son of a bitch, actually had some pretty good ideas when it came to protecting train conductors, which is now something we care about now that we can have armed military on the train. I didn't used to care about Giuliani when he was just being in Borat, but now his ideas can really be used to control ordinary people. I like that guy.
In addition to the bag checks, the governor's plan includes amending state law to ban repeat offenders.
Every single one of these bullet points will amount to more power for the state, a greater ability to arrest and control.
Installing cameras in each conductor's cabin.
Mental health outrage. You get the idea, mental health. You know, we'll put something on Instagram. There'll be a hashtag. Everyone's going to feel a whole lot better. And if they don't... Now, a perspective from the other side of the aisle, to put it mildly, Alex Jones. Alex Jones has been a guest on our show, and Alex Jones will be a guest on our show again. As you know, I consider Alex Jones to be a kind of shamanic force in politics. Of course, he occasionally says things that are pretty crazy. Hey, who doesn't? But when it comes to the issue of piloting authoritarian measures and perhaps even martial law, Alex Jones is a voice that's perhaps important. Let's have a look at what he's saying on this subject.
When I was cutting my teeth 29 years ago on air, Bill Clinton had just been in office for a year or so, and it was confirmed, the military was warning, it was coming out, they were leaking classified documents that now are all basically admitted and have been publicly rolled out against the public to incrementally bring in martial law. So they went from this being secret under Clinton, and then with Bush, yeah, it's mainly for Al-Qaeda, but it's also for domestic groups. And then you're asking, well, what's this really all about? And then you start to realize it's part of a long-term process of just getting the military, the police, the public ready for this. So here's what's happening. We're not going to have UN troops one day or Russian troops like Red Dawn, and you're in Colorado and all of a sudden parachutes come down and you've got Russian troops shooting at you. It'll be our own troops, but they'll be made up of people that have been tested for decades, going through the training, going along with attacking their own people. And now the troops are being deployed and searching everyone's bags.
Like, how can you not be affected by that image? That's armed military personnel on the subway being normalized. I am quite sympathetic to this perspective, given what I've witnessed and experienced in the last few years. And indeed, Jones is showing he's working out an incremental increase in these tactics and techniques over several administrations. Isn't that indeed the domestic heart of what globalism means? That regardless of who you vote for, you've got deep state interests that have an agenda that spans various administrations, and those administrations will focus on hot button cultural topics. Meanwhile, the projects of war and social control will continue. And even beyond the physical representation of military presence on the street, which is terrifying, we know and often discuss how techniques designed to track and control dissidents abroad, specifically literally groups like ISIS, are now deployed. Once you've seen armed military personnel conducting bag checks on a subway in New York City when there isn't a war happening or anything remotely like it domestically across America, then you have to acknowledge that that is something that is significant. And quite a lot of power and time and propaganda has to be invested in saying that someone like Alex Jones is hysteric. And due to his, let's call it his presentational style, he does make that kind of analysis in some circles quite credible. But let's not forget what we're looking at. We're looking at armed troops on the subway in New York. There's not been a terror attack. There's not been a terror attack. We're not in the middle of COVID. It's just being normalized.
Without a warrant. All these decades of preparation for martial law, and that's what this is here.
It is interesting. Bags being searched without a warrant by troops is a pretty significant step to normalise, particularly in a city like New York. Often when I talk about piloting, I mean Australia, internment camps, trucker protests, and the evocation of the Emergencies Act in Canada, the freezing of bank accounts in Canada and Ukraine. New York City, that's a bold move. But I suppose the fact is broadly compliance has become allied to opposition to Trump. That's what it means. Like, that if you are opposed to liberal democracy, and liberal democracy now means war in Gaza, it means war against Russia, it means being compliant when it comes to medical suggestions that come from the state. All ideas that in the 60s, when the heroes were people like Malcolm X, like, you wouldn't have thought, one thing you want to be is obedient. When Pfizer says jump, you say how high, and I'm not sure I'll be able to because my heart hurts. Now, authoritarianism has become somehow allied to liberalism, and the idea that military force and military intelligence is turned against a domestic population has become normalized. We know from personal experience now that agencies, deep state agencies and proxies funded by the state that were used as intelligence assets to oppose terrorists, as they were then called, perhaps understandably, in various Middle Eastern wars and subsequent disputes, are now deployed against domestic populations. That's a fact in your country, in mine, across the world. So, in essence, what we're witnessing is we, the domestic population of these nations, are regarded as the enemy. And that doesn't take brilliant analysis, actually, because just watch the Oscars. You know, Trump, that's 50% of the population. That's 50% of the population, and that includes black people, Hispanics, significant numbers of women. It's not just, mega, it's not that. It isn't that. And by the way, you're allowed to be that if that's what you are. All of you have the right to be who you are.
But they have to create the climate first for martial law and civil emergency to sell us on it, the angrier world that Klaus Schwab talks about.
Yeah, it's an important point that the occupying force are there as protectors, and actually that's not a new idea. The English or British occupation of Northern Ireland begins as we're here to protect, I think initially, forgive me, Catholics in Northern Ireland. It just became normalised, and I know there's a long and complex history between our two separate nations, but often the introduction of the military is portrayed as for safety and security and protection. I think that probably happens in the sort of Balkan Wars, Middle Eastern campaigns, peacekeeping force. Actually, if that piece of language was introduced when I was a little older and a little better educated, I'd gone, peacekeeping force? That doesn't seem like the way you get peace.
I say the whole world must learn of our peaceful ways. by force.
This is not a right-wing piece of writing, by the way. In this journalism, Donald Trump is criticised for his attempts to deploy the National Guard during the uprisings that came from George Floyd's murder. So this is not apolitical, this is political, but it's political from the side that you would not have expected. That, for me, increases its validity and is precisely the type of discourse that we must engage in. If you find yourself either side of that line, you're being controlled. We can't bring you this content without the support of our partners, and in this instance it's a very appropriate partner because you're an awakened wonder and you know that there's every possibility that your communications are being spied on. People are listening in on your private conversations. I say people, I mean government agencies and government-funded private agencies that are used as proxies to crush dissent. You've been watching this show for a while. You know that these Orwellian authorities, although Orwell himself was pretty interested in freedom, are spying on us, and they'll do whatever it takes to control the narrative by controlling our connection. That's why we've partnered with Freedom Chat, a private messaging app that allows us to text who we want without fear of the tyrannical authorities listening into our conversations. This is the app that we trust to keep our data and our conversations private. Freedom Chat has true end-to-end encryption, no storage of messages on their servers, and no commercial use of user data, meaning they won't sell your data for political gain or monetary benefit. With Freedom Chat, you can disable screenshots, deactivate your phone's camera and microphone via the sensors off feature, and you can even prevent other individuals in a chat from saving your images or videos to their device without your explicit permission. Excellent. You know it, and I know it. The establishment is watching us right now and our conversations. Stay free and protect your privacy with Freedom Chat. Go download the app right now by simply scanning the QR code, this QR code that you're looking at, or visit freedomchat.com/brand. Download it. It's brilliant. Let's get back to it. The mobilisation of 2,000 city and state police and National Guard troops in New York City on the pretext of fighting crime in the vast subway system is a demonstration of the reactionary character of the Democratic Party. Last month, New York City's Democratic Mayor Eric Adams announced he would deploy 1,000 New York Police Department cops in the subway system after a law and order campaign by the city's tabloids sensationalising a handful of violent attacks against subway riders and transit workers, which, knowing what I know now about how the media operates, were possibly written in conjunction with the people that introduced this law. It would be, here, we got these stories, we'll give you access to this story, we'll give you this interview, we'll give you this access, we'll give you this tax break, we'll give you this. We now know that that's the relationship between the media and the state. Do you think that the X-Files was the first time deep state were embedded within a media organisation? Let me know in the chat. On Wednesday, New York Governor Kathy Hochul, also a Democrat, announced she was redeploying 750 National Guard troops already in New York City, as well as 250 state troopers and police of the Metropolitan Transport Authority, MTA, the state agency that runs the subways, to increase the number of uniformed personnel patrolling subway stations and riding trains. I remember when I was a kid, used to hear people talk about, you want to see more bobbies, that's the word in our country, bobbies on the street. But the image there is just sort of a member of the police force on a bicycle. And again, this might just be where I am in my own personal evolution. It seems like a rather pleasant idea, a member of the police force, again that word, that is working for the community. But now, just think about how it feels to you as a person when you're on the subway and you see people with machine guns. Do you feel inside yourself, that's good that that's happening, I feel more safe? Now, I don't know what else might make you feel unsafe. I don't know who you are or where you're from or how you've been coached and trained. Maybe a group of young people with their hoods up makes you feel bad. Maybe a group of drunk men in suits makes you feel bad. Maybe people wearing religious attire of some denomination makes you feel bad. But one thing I can say with some certainty is granting further and further authority to a group invested in war and control will not be good for any of us, regardless of our outward accoutrements. The troops are currently operating out of Fort Hamilton in Brooklyn as part of Joint Task Force Empire Shield. I mean, that's not good, is it? Joint Task Force Empire Shield. I mean, they're telling you what they're up to. What are you doing? We're shielding the Empire. And what if I don't agree with the Empire? Well, I mean, I could put it in a number of ways, but how about, well, I don't know. Joint Task Force Empire Shield, set up nearly a quarter century ago after the terrorist attacks of September the 11th, 2001. Okay, so that event increased authority, increased spying, increased surveillance, increased war, and we all agreed it was a good thing to do, didn't we? Except for the millions of people who marched against that war against Iraq, which, by the way, happened anyway, of course. We all agreed that it was necessary because we were under threat. So what's happening now? We're under threat, right? From MAGA Trump on one side or immigrants on the other side, so we better get the military on the streets. They regularly patrol in the Grand Central Station, the Port Authority, and a few other transportation hubs wearing camouflage uniforms and equipped with automatic rifles, but not engaging with the population. Now the soldiers will take on the role of supplementing the NYPD, helping with random searches of bags and backpacks and other police activity. They will also move deeper into the subway system, appearing at more of its 472 stations and riding trains. Like, this is not CBGB's, New York Dolls, Ramones, Bowie, Warhol, Blondie, New York City, let's get on it, yeah, we're free. If I lived in New York right now, I'd be frightened. I've lived in New York before. If I lived in New York and they militarized the underground, I'd think it's time to get out. And we'll be seeing this, I predict, and actually Alex Jones has predicted already, with a good degree more experience and research than we're able to deploy, that we're going to be seeing this more often. And the good thing about it is we'll know, won't we? Because they won't just suddenly do it and say it's to pick up sweet rappers, although, God, maybe they do that in Singapore. They will say it's to protect you. So watch out for that. Now you know what to watch out for. Hochul announced other repressive measures, including the installation of cameras in every subway car and in the cabs used by drivers and conductors. The Democrats in the state legislature will introduce a bill to bar anyone convicted of a crime of violence on the subways from using the transit system for 3 years, effectively barring them from living and working in the city, where only the wealthy and upper middle class can go about their daily lives without riding the subway. Again, this is like hate law stuff, isn't it? Well, you can't blame us. If someone's committed a violent crime in a subway, then it's sensible to ban them. If you commit a crime against one of our workers, one of our personnel, we have a duty to protect them, and we cannot let you ride the subway, except what if they didn't? And what was the provocation? And under whose authority? And who trusts the judiciary now anyway? And who trusts the military? And who trusts the police force? Even the military don't trust the military. They're setting themselves on fire. They're living on the brink of poverty while still serving. There are 40,000 of them homeless right now. If I see someone in a military uniform, I don't know whether to let them check my bag or flip them a buck. The terms hate and terror are being more widely used to appropriately categorize groups in ways that means that they can be penalized, controlled, criminalized, or shut down. You've all seen videos of a mentally ill kid being dragged out by the police for saying something off key in public. Wasn't that long ago? Oh, Tourette's, they've got Tourette's. Oh, they're using this authority in whatever way is convenient. A terrorist now, and for some time has been, someone that the centralized authority has a problem with, an individual or group whose intentions are adversarial to the state. Now, the problem is all of our intentions ought to be adversarial to the state because the state facilitates globalist corporatism, primarily domestic order in order to continue to facilitate that, secondarily, and other than that, it's like, I don't know, putting on things like the Oscar. I don't know what the other role is. January 6th, protesters are terrorists. Good, because that was terrible. That was an insurrection. And pro-Palestine protesters are terrorists. Well, good, because those people, they're not like us. Oh, so are you not noticing the crucial fact that wherever you might feel on the political spectrum our culture offers us, you can be regarded as a terrorist if you're a nuisance. Statistics collected in recent years show that the campaign to whip up fears of violence on the subways has no basis in fact. Oh, good. Right. I mentioned earlier that there'd probably be information available on the amount of attacks that take place. Here's some information. So get ready. NYPD figures showed a 2.6% decrease in subway crime in 2023 compared to 2022. Although there was a jump in January 2024 compared to the same month last year, probably because they registered statistics differently because they knew they were about to introduce these laws, a cynic might assert in conjunction with a spate of stories released in high-profile and compliant media outlets. Hey, let me know in the chat if you agree. According to a separate analysis by the MTA and the New York Times, that vast template of opinion, the New York Times, violent crimes occur at a rate of between 1 and 2 per million subway rides. Quick, get the army down here. Once every million or two subway rides, there could be a crime. Well, are there any areas in culture where there's continual crime? There are. Do you want to sort that out? But a few violent incidents, the knifing of a subway driver, the shooting of a passenger in Brooklyn, have been sensationalized by the media and capitalist politicians of both parties. Hochul did not conceal the political motives behind her announcement of the troop redeployment. I'm also going to demonstrate that Democrats fight crime as well, she told MSNBC on Thursday. This narrative that Republicans have said and hijacked the story that we're soft on crime, that we defund the police. No, not only do we defund the police, we defund and yet still use the military on the subway. There you go, get down there and search bags. And when you've finished your tour, there's a sleeping bag for you. Go sleep down there. The New York Civil Liberties Union said today's announcement fails to address long-standing problems of homelessness, poverty, or access to mental health care, all of which serving personnel could evidently do with. Remember Aaron Bushnell, just a little while ago, scrubbed from the internet. Instead, a sweeping surveillance state was being established. One of the key episodes in Trump's preparation of his attempted political coup on January 6, 2021, you can let me know whether or not you agree that that's what that was his threat to invoke the Insurrection Act during the summer of 2020 and send the military into major American cities to suppress popular demonstrations against police violence sparked by the murder of George Floyd. Now a Democratic governor is deploying troops in the largest American city on an equally bogus pretext. Doesn't matter whether you are at a Black Lives Matter protest or a pro-Trump MAGA protest. In the end, if you get in their way, you're a terrorist. You have more in common with one another than you have in common with the media or political systems that are attempting continually to divide you. It is impossible for the US ruling elite to carry out this policy democratically. It requires a frontal assault on the democratic rights of the working class and the build-up of the repressive forces of the capitalist state. So by the time that new measures are introduced that are unpopular, whether it's the increase of war or the increase of authoritarianism, the sight of the military on the streets and transport facilities of major metropolises will be normal and accepted. Look at the people already just breezing past armed guards on a subway as if it ain't no thing. Perhaps thinking to themselves, this will protect me from immigrants. Perhaps thinking to themselves, this will protect me from BLM protesters. Perhaps thinking to themselves, this will protect me from January 6 insurrectionists. Whatever they need to put in your mind to make you more compliant, they're willing to put there. That's why we are very determined, most determined, to put into your heart a spirit of real individual sovereignty and collective representation, so that we may oppose this authoritarianism together. But that's just what I think. Let me know what you think in the chat. See you in a second.
No, here's the fucking news.